Morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest Webmart webinar where we're talking all things letterbox marketing. And we're very pleased to have another great panel today with Nicola and Yvette. So, Nicola, do you want to just give us a quick overview of who you are and your experience in the world of letterbox marketing?
Sure. So my name is Nicola Thornton. I have been working in direct marketing for over 25 years. Obviously, I started when I was about 10. I have worked both client side and I've worked media side. I've worked with all sectors. I've specialised in sectors as well. So I've specialised in the charity sector. A lot of my time was spent over at Royal Mail. I was spent the last 10 years over at Royal Mail Market Reach, which is the specialist direct marketing team of Royal Mail. And they do all things mail there. So I have lots of evidence-based research and experience in mail there. And then this year I moved over to Whistl Door Drop Media to specialise in door drop media. And I have to say I am loving it there. And I've also won a couple of DMA awards with charity door drops. So yeah, that's me.
The oracle of all things mailing, and by the sounds of it, fab. Thanks for that. And Yvette, do you want to just introduce yourself to the people watching?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Yvette Priddy. I work for Serious Readers, a lighting company. I'm a marketing coordinator. So I'm actually a baby marketer. I've only been in the industry for less than a year. So it'll be a year on like the 7th or 12th of December or something, which is always here. So Serious Readers are great. They saw my potential and they took me on, and they've just trained me in everything. There's a really small team here, so I get so much exposure to every aspect of our marketing, all of our channels, everything. So I can do anything from organising and coordinating all of our marketing channels to scheduling to organising photo shoots. It's really fun. So I love it here. The team's great. The company's wonderful. And yeah, but still getting into it. So not as experienced as Nicola. She is like got all of the malarkey. But
you're the baby, I'm the granny, love.
I'm the baby. Yeah, I'm the baby. Not granny. No. But yeah, but still got some insight on what we've done over the past year, and also like looking ways to improve and get everything we can out. So yeah, that's myself.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm Tom Maskill, Sales and Marketing Director at Webmart. We're a sustainable integrated marketing agency, and we work with brands like Serious Brands and partners like Whistl to deliver. We deliver 15 million mailing packs a year and tens of millions of door drops besides. So hopefully between the three of us, we've got a fairly broad range of client side, agency side experience in the world of letterbox marketing. So I thought it'd be good to start off with defining what letterbox marketing is, and then just going through a few of the basics, what things must you include, must you consider, must you exclude when running a mailing campaign, and then we can dive into what we can do to optimize campaigns, both from a return perspective and from a minimizing investment perspective, which will be particularly pertinent as we enter the joys of a recession. Talk a little bit about trends in letterbox marketing and offline marketing more generally, particularly on sustainability and some of the interactivity that we're seeing in mail at present. And then we'll finish off with the Q&A. So if anybody's got any questions throughout, if you pop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the session. So to start off with what letterbox marketing is, I think Nicola mentioned a few of the different channels in her introduction, but we define it internally at Webmart as anything you can put through a letterbox. So that could be an addressed piece of mail, direct mail, unaddressed, door drop, partially addressed, called partially addressed mail, and programmatic mail, so triggered mail from some kind of online activity. Now, when it comes to running a mailing campaign, Nicola, in your experience, what are some of the real basic things that you need to consider and include when putting together a mailing campaign?
Okay, I mean, the first thing you've got to start off with is what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And is it about KPIs? Is it about brand building? Is it about awareness? Are you trying to get people to go into a store? What is it about? What are you trying to achieve? That's the fundamental thing. And then the next thing obviously is your audience. Who do you want to reach? You may also want to consider what are your competition doing? And those are the things that you need to be thinking about before you start your pack. Because if you haven't got those things together, the best creative in the world isn't really going to work if you've not got your objective right and you haven't got the right audience.
Fantastic. And Yvette, do you, when you're carrying out mailing campaigns for serious brands, are they the steps that you go through, or do you have any others?
Yeah, no. So the CTA is a big call to action, is a big part of it. With that, so like you were saying, the first thing, clear instruction for your customer, who you are talking to, how they can get in touch or buy, whatever it is, you need to make it clear and direct to your audience. So again, know what you want to say, but know who you're talking to and how to speak to them. It's also, what do you want to be, just going back to the call to action, what do you actually want that to be for? Like, is it to drive people to the website? Is it to reinforce a message? Whatever it is, you need to make it clear and direct. So yeah, but everything Nicola was saying, all good, perfect. I was just going to say as well, something which we do, we tailor our message dependent on like our customers. So someone who owns multiple lights, someone who hasn't maybe bought one light, I don't know, 3 years ago, and someone who isn't owner of a light. You don't, obviously they could all be in the same maybe age demographic, but the way in which you speak to the individual customers needs to be different. You need to remember that when you're planning this, don't just assume everyone's the same. You need to make sure that you know who you're speaking to and they understand and they know what they need to do. But yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And things like, making sure you follow a kind of formula. One of the formulas that we've always kind of used in our kind of consultancy is AIDCA. So awareness, interest, desire, conviction, action. So that's how you've got to guide your reader, your consumer, through those things to get to the action. And you'd be surprised at how many people forget about the action in the marketing, where they might be talking about the brand and how great their brand is, as opposed to what you want the person to do. Because as marketers, sometimes we kind of get stuck in the silo of making the most amazing campaign and forgetting that once it gets to somebody's house, you're only really going to get their attention for about 3, maybe 5 seconds to where they're going to make that decision.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, the things that you picked out there in terms of audience segmentation, defining your audience, defining your objectives, are all kind of underpinned by data. So understanding what data you have, how you collect it, how you're then going to use it is fundamental when you're starting any campaign. Right from the setting the objectives. So if your objective is to say drive traffic to your website, understanding before you execute the campaign what that objective is, and crucially how you're going to measure it.
Yes.
And what success looks like. Because it's all very well and good having an objective and a way of measuring it, but if you've not said this campaign will be a success if X, it's very difficult to determine if it's worked or not. And likewise with the audience segmentation piece, collecting, storing and using rich data allows you at Serious Brands to do that, right? So you've got the information on customers, when they last bought, how many they've bought, what their average order value has been. So you have the ability internally to communicate differently to those kinds of customers.
Exactly.
Now, yeah. I've worked with, and I'm sure Nick, you've worked with as well, lots of companies who do not have data stored in the right way or with the right granularity to be able to communicate with customers individually.
Yeah.
And so ensuring that you collect that data correctly is crucial when you're starting any kind of campaign. Let's say then we've defined our objectives, we've defined our audience, and we're now moving through to deciding on format and creative and moving forward to execute the campaign. What are the kind of stages that you would go through with the customer, Nicola, when deciding on what the best format is to use, what the best CTA is to use, what the best timing is for a mailing to land?
Okay, I mean, budget is going to play a key role in that, in terms of format, because there are so many different formats that you can use, you know, in letterbox marketing. So, you know, whether that's just going to be a simple A5 flyer, or is it going to be a roll fold? Is it going to be die cut? Is it going to be a pack? Is it going to be a catalogue? You know, it really depends on what their budget is, that will then lead you down a kind of roll of formats. And as you know, Tom, there is a million different formats that you can use. That's the beauty of letterbox marketing. You can be creative in terms of the format, and you know, the format can also lead to the interactivity of the piece. So, you know, with creating almost stand out as it lands on the doormat. So budget is key. And then, you know, what do they want to do with that? So if it's a simple call to action, it doesn't need to be something that has got 8 pages in it. You know, it can be something that is small. If it's something more like what Yvette's selling, you would need to include some product in that. So your format is going to be different.
And what kind of formats do you typically use, Yvette, with the series brands, and how did you get to that format that you use today?
So we've kind of, with our customer mailers and our bought list mailers, we kind of do the same thing along the two sides. We're speaking, like, the copy and the way we speak to the customers differently, but we use a 40-page A5 mailer. That's our standard 100 GSM. We are actually recently, over the past few months, reducing that. So I'll go on to it later in regarding to like budget and things and how we can like help with optimizing it. But we're reducing it to a 36-page with 4-page externals of 100 GSM, and then all the internals of 32 at 80 GSM. So dropping it down ever so slightly so that the cover and the front doesn't change, but the inside does, and just making our messaging more compact and concise. The things which we are saying are very important, but we need to find ways we can reduce it. We've also been looking at doing a 16-page mailer, so you're dropping it even further down, but A4 size, so having more space, but like on the actual page itself, but reducing the page quantity. So something which you need to do is speak to your printers and your suppliers and make sure that you're using the most efficient paper and not having any waste. That will also help with the budget and everything later. But yeah, we that's kind of our general format with our direct mailing. We've tested others, but we find that's the best, to be honest, for us. But yeah, mainly the A5 40-page like mailers are our standard. So yeah, we do need a lot of information, need to about our products. We've got 3 main products, but to get all of that in there, and to actually, because obviously we're quite premium products, we need the information to back up the price.
The value.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and what amazing products they are, and we want to get that across to people. And you can't do that in like a, I don't know, 4-page. You can't. It's you can put an initial like CTA in there, an initial like, okay, here's us, like here was where we are, but that's to drive them to somewhere else. That's never going to give them enough information. Maybe one product, maybe an additional product, but our main range products, the more information the better, which is weird because sometimes you want short and snappy. So yeah, that's kind of what we do as our main stance on that.
It just varies across different sectors. You know, if you're in a kind of retail sector, you are going to want something that's got more pagination, and there's been research that shows that the more product you show, the higher the sales are. So you know, it depends on what sector you're in.
Yeah,
will depend on what format works. You know, charity sector, for example, they have a long letter. They tend to include incentives in there. There tends to be a lot of information in there because they want to tell the story about why you should support the cause. Yeah. Whereas when they're doing activity around driving sign-ups for events or something like that, that can be shorter because you can drive people online to actually sign up for events. So it just depends on what the actual campaign is about, really.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. It's so dependent on what material, what creative you're, which is also the offer, like what the offer is, and Yeah, and it depends on what sector you're in. Like I know, like even though we have our products, someone who does like a company which does fashion, for example, they might have a lot more pages, or because they have to fit so much in. If they're very like heavy catalog based, then they have a lot more. So that might be too heavy for them to be within the restrictions if they want to be under like the 100-gram mark for postage. But for us, it's also, to be honest, the mailings, you've got the A5 size postage, which you have to have under 100 grams. So why use a smaller mailing when you're going to have to pay for the space anyway? Like, yes, you could fill it with third-party inserts if you want to, because we do, because it helps with budget and everything. But you've got that space, use it. Don't
waste it.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you? So yeah, that's something we're finding as well. We can drop it, but then we're like, oh, well, we've got the space, so what are we doing that for?
I mean, that's slightly different from a door drop perspective, because obviously from a door drop perspective, the weight is less. But again, you can still go higher in weight in door drop should you need to. So yeah, and also one of the things I think from a going back to the sort of what you're talking about, the customers, in terms of you segmenting your customer base from your existing customers to any stuff that you were prospecting on, you would need to make sure the covers of those reflect that difference, because there's the existing customers you would want it to be talking about new, and your kind of new customers you want to be talking about bestsellers, so the sorts of things that people want to buy. That, as a rule, generally in catalog marketing, that's what you need to be going with.
Absolutely, yeah. We touched on a few really interesting points there. So when we're talking about the kind of factors where that are going to influence the format that we do, we're talking about budgets, which is obviously a very pertinent point as we go into a recession, talking about the sector that our business is in and what we want to achieve. So if we're a retailer and we've got a really broad product range and we want to achieve a sale as a result of this mailing campaign, we're going to need a lot of real estate to be able to demonstrate that. And you make a good point there about the postage bands. So with door drop, obviously you've got the smaller weight bands up to 20 grams and then beyond. With direct mail, we've got up to 100 grams and then that A5 size restriction. So particularly with direct mail, when the majority of the cost of the campaign is in the postage, exactly to your point, if you're going to be paying for up to 100 grams anyway, you have the option to fill it. And then a point there you made as well, Yvette, around consulting with the printers or what kind of agency you're working with to ensure that your format can be produced efficiently. So we have a lot of customers who come to us with these incredible designs, and we say that looks great, literally impossible to produce, or is possible to produce, but it's going to cost you a fortune, or here are 3 small tweaks you could make, which would make it significantly cheaper and get it on a better postage tariff. So no, I agree with all those points. It's very interesting, and I think the if any of the people watching haven't done mailings before and potentially looking at doing something and they're unsure as to what might suit their sector, I know we work with Market Reach and with Jikmail a lot to get insights to understand how people from different sectors engage with mail from that industry. And I imagine, Nick, that's something that you'll make use of a lot with Whistl being a founding partner of Jik.
Absolutely. Jik is brilliant. It's now we've now actually got an official media monitoring tool for mail, which is brilliant. And what Jik shows is, mail stays in the home for over a week. It reaches more than one person when it's in the home. It's looked at, depending on whether it's door drop or DM, between 3 and 4 times whilst it's in the home. So when people think that a DM piece just goes into the home and that's it, that's not correct. It's actually getting much more of a campaign impression. So you might send something out to 250,000 people, for example. But if that's being seen 3 times, then obviously your media impressions are much greater. So, you know, it's like it's a monitoring tool for, I see the letterbox as your shop window, basically. You know, it's basically like delivering your shop window into somebody's home. So, you know, the JIC actually can then measure how many times somebody has looked at your shop window and what they've done with it. So yeah, it's a great resource, and you can identify, you know, hidden audiences, so people who you might not necessarily have thought were your audience, because they might be people who are engaged with mail really frequently, but they don't get targeted very often. So it's an absolutely brilliant site for gaining insights into your mail. Yeah,
fantastic. And Yvette, when you mentioned testing, well, we were talking about the mailings that you currently do. How do you decide what to test?
So we actually test on every single material we do in every channel. So yeah, everything we test on emails. It can be as basic as templates, like, and brochures. So to be honest, we do. So we're very seasonal. Are very peak in the dark, like in, I don't know, from September to February, because it's dark, people need lights.
Yeah,
exactly. And then in the summer it's difficult because of the budget, but we like to do more testing there, but it's also hard because we want to do testing on higher volumes too. So we test things really on what we need to know on quite a high scale, which we know is quite safe. We also retest things. So sometimes when we think, oh, let's do an artworked envelope against like a plain envelope, for example, then we'll go, okay, we'll test that. Then 3 months later, we'll test that again, just to make sure it's not a fluke. So something which we did is we tested the A4 size, like I was saying about earlier, the A4 16 page. But we sent it to our direct, so our customers, and to our cold mailings, and it worked great with our customers. So we thought, okay, let's do it again, and let's do it to both this time. Let's do it to the cold mailings as well. Awful. The cold mailings hated it. Like, it did so bad, and we were like, oh, okay, let's not do that again. Obviously it was still okay, but it wasn't as effective as our standard piece. But yeah, it helps pretty much. Each testing we do helps us build a picture of what we should then do in direct mail. At the same time, we do need to remember, like I just said, what works for one doesn't always work for another. But it's just test. Even if you're like, oh, what should I test? Just test. Like, we test offers a lot. So we give a free product, our compact light, with majority of our mailings. That's our standard offer. We're now doing a tiered offer where if you have our high definition light, you get free compact, and if you have the Alex light, which is the second middle range light, you get a Rome light, another additional, which is, the compact light is 150 RRP and the Rome light is £100 RRP. So it's, and then the classic light, which is our standard, you just get the free delivery. So we've tested that compact with the HD. We've tested, like, the products we've tested, oh, will this increase it? Well, if we do our Rome light over the two, will that make it better? But it always seems to come back that the compact is the best one with that light. So test, but reinforce the test, make sure you're doing it right. Also know that with testing, you need to, sorry, I know I talk about testing a lot just because we do it so much.
To be honest, exactly what we would recommend.
Yeah, we do. We need to remember, like, if you have, let's say, a 10% margin difference in the two tests, that doesn't always mean that the other one did the best. That's why, again, you need to retest. Also, let's say if you're quite new to testing, one thing I would say is be careful to commit and then not test, because for example of that, we did a brochure insert and we did a smaller size and we thought, oh my God, amazing, this would save us thousands of pounds in paper, like, this is great. So we tested it. If we didn't test that, it would have lost us about £400,000. If we just went, let's just do that because it's cheaper, we would have lost that much money. And it's so something which you think might not have a difference actually could have a detrimental impact. It could go the other way, and it could be like, oh my God, that did great, let's do that, saves us loads of money. But yeah, it's crazy. And even, to be honest, we ran 2 exactly the same creatives once, just with different codes, like exactly the same, to our customer mailer. So just a split test, everything was the same, just 2 different codes. And there was about a 20% difference in return, like to one to the other, everything was the same. So testing is so tricky, because when something does amazing, and you test it 3 months later, it could be on the season, it could be on the market, what everything's like at the moment. It could be anything. That's why you can't just take one result and go, yeah, we'll do that, amazing, that's great. It's weird. But something with our testing and tracking is we actually we track everything through codes. I know it's quite old school, but it does work for us. So the unique code allows us to track the results of the test. That's how we track it, and that's how we know what to do going forward as well. We did a mailer, which is a part exchange mailer. So what that does is, someone who's had their light for, I don't know, however many years, like our halogen lights, which are our legacy, our first kind of lights we built before we go into the LED brand. We said, anyone who has this light, return it to us and you'll get £100 off an LED light, LED HD. So that mailer the first one we did probably did about 50% better than our standard mailings. And you don't know if it was because it was new to anything and people haven't seen it before. You don't know if it's because like people are like, oh wow, like I love their lights, they are definitely built to last, let's get the newer version, let's upgrade it. But we now include that in maybe like every 3 months we send a new one. And we've also broadened that was just of our high definition halogen light. We've now broadened that to our other 2 lights, so the Alex and Classic, and they get the £100 off. We've also done it to Alex and Classic LEDs. And I'll come into the sustainability side of that later, because we actually upcycle them as well, those lights, which we get returned. But yeah, so it's crazy. The amount of testing we do is it's causes a lot of work, but it's really worth it.
Absolutely, so, yeah. And I think the point you touched on there about the myriad factors that go into making a campaign perform really well, not so well, or totally flop. It's understanding which things are going to have the biggest impact when you test them. And I don't know, Nick, if you can talk around how would you go about deciding which things were most pertinent for a customer to test?
I think fundamentally what Yvette's just said is you have to keep testing. That is something that we would say. A lot of times people will test a channel and go, it didn't work, I'm not doing it ever again. You know, for some reason they have a tendency to do that with a mail channel, but not with any other channel. Don't really understand why that is the case. So Yvette, you are brilliant in that sense, in that you keep testing is exactly what we would say. I think in terms of what you would be recommending to people, it has to be linked to the consumers that you're sending it to. You know, so obviously if there is there's a cost of living crisis going on at the moment, then you wouldn't necessarily, if you were a charity, for example, you wouldn't necessarily want to be using a pack that looks like it's really, really expensive, A, because you don't want to do that because of the cause, and B, you don't want to be doing that in terms of the amount of money that you're spending. So I think it really depends on who you're sending it to, what the campaign is about, that will determine what you would test. I think testing things like frequency, it might be that you need to communicate with a customer more than once to actually get them along your buying curve. I know that there are some charities that do that now, that actually do frequency in terms of they will send out their message and then they will send out a follow-up to actually get people to actually, commit to the pledging or donating. So I think essentially it comes back to what's going on in the market at the moment. You think about last year, nobody expected what was going to happened in terms of Russia, you know, so a lot of campaigns took a hit around sort of March, April time, and, you know, the cost of living with prices kicked in as well then. So a lot of those things you couldn't necessarily plan for when the plans are being made marketing wise, you wouldn't necessarily know about.
Yeah.
So again, those campaigns that maybe bombed wouldn't necessarily, it could be external factors that did that. So we would be recommending that you would take the learnings from the campaign and then try again.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's a similar approach that we take. So we try to build out a hypothesis with the customer before testing something. So because often the question we get is, we've been doing this mailing, or we've been doing the same format and same frequency, same quantity for a decade. We wouldn't know where to start with testing. We don't know what to test, what's going to have the biggest impact. And so our approach is we take our experience with other brands, our insights through market reach, JIC mail and places like that, to say, and doing some competitor analysis, which you alluded to earlier, and say, here's what others are doing. Here's how people are responding in your sector. Taking a look if the data is available, the customer's data, and saying, here's how people are interacting with it and using it. And then we can make a recommendation on perhaps we could test this new format, this cheaper format, if your goal is to reduce the cost of the campaign, or perhaps we could test these different incentives if your goal is to up the number of orders, the volume of orders that you get.
I think that's right, Tom. I was just gonna say, it's about what you want to get out of the test you're doing. So what do you want to do? Do you want to increase interaction? Do you want to reduce your budget? What do you want to do? And then test around that. That's definitely something. Sorry, that just made me like 100%. Like,
and sometimes you could, you know, if you're testing something like an offer, potentially you could test on email first. You know, you could do some tests on other channels and then test it on mail, you know, because you would have had a kind of an example of how it worked quite quickly with an email campaign that would give you some confidence to test in a print media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just as some kind of worked examples of how other brands have done this, it's often when it comes to the cost reduction, because that's often a reason driving factor behind testing is how can we reduce costs without impacting our return. But part of it is phrasing the question like that, I think. So a lot of brands previously would say, this is the marketing activity we do, can we do it cheaper, please? And instead reframing that question as, here's the return we get from our current marketing campaigns, how can we get the same return for less?
Yes.
And then working with agencies, printers, suppliers to figure out what tests you can do to unlock that. So it might be, can we, instead of sending something out naked, can we wrap it and get a cheaper postage tariff? Let's A/B test that, see if we get the same response, and then roll that out. To your example on charities, we worked with a charity years and years ago on a dollar drop campaign, and their goal was to increase the average donation value that they got through. And it was an A/B test as simple as asking for higher monthly commitments, increase their average donation value by 50%. So it can often be really small tweaks that make a massive difference. But I think we're unanimous in our recommendation for continued testing across all channels. And like you said, it's bizarre, because if you're doing a paid social campaign or PPC or anything like that, there's no way you wouldn't test. You'd be mad. But with mail, it seems different. It's crazy. But anyway, yes, I think we're all on the same page with that one. So moving on now to optimizing a campaign. So we had a chat yesterday when we were talking about areas for this, and we came up with 1,000,001 different ideas of ways that we can optimize campaigns. And one of them was around linking mailing campaigns with other marketing channels to optimize the overall performance. And I'm sure, Nicola, you've had plenty of experience in timing mailing campaigns with other marketing activity, have them working together rather than siloed.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at channels as an and an or. It's an and, you know. The channels can work together, they can integrate with each other. You know, you can flight your media so that you get a better brand exposure and, you know, and recall, so that, you know, people will see your brand potentially. You know, you might send out a door drop that runs before a TV campaign, or you might send out something that runs after a TV campaign, just so that you're actually flighting the media, you're getting more out of the activity. Similarly, on, you know, using your social stuff as well. The problem you have sometimes in larger organizations is that people sit in brand silos and they don't necessarily talk to each other. So that can be a little bit of a problem. You know, you could even use a similar creative that you're using with any DRTV that you're running. You could run a similar creative so that people have that brand recall, and, you know, again, it increases the likelihood that people are going to respond.
Yeah, so and we can do that. That's another one that's can be difficult to measure the uplift that they get across different channels. But again, we get some really useful insight out of places like Jigmail and Market Reach. So we know, for example, on average, a mailing campaign that follows a TV campaign will have a 20% uplift in response rates. Once you've received a mailing campaign, on average, you'll spend 30% longer engaging with that brand's social content. So we can use that kind of data to as a kind of a baseline to test against. And Yvette, I'm sure you have the benefit, I guess, of being quite a small team, so you'll have visibility over what's going on across all the marketing channels, so you can get them to play nicely together.
Yeah, definitely. There's about 4 of us in the team, so we are constantly busy, which is absolutely great because I like that. It makes everything be, but it's also good because the consistency across all of our channels is great. So we do so much print because of our audience, our target audience. So ours is kind of different to what you were saying, Nicola. It's very effective to what you're saying, to make sure you have one after the other to try and link them. But to be honest, ours are kind of always there, especially now, like in multiple newspapers, and like we've got like 4 mailings landing like when the month, just like our customer mailers, like they're going to be sick of us, but it'd be great because they think we can get everything out, so it's good, and we want them to engage and stuff. But our overall message is the same. So you get a mailer from us, or you look at the newspaper and you get an insert, and it's the brand is there. So the message might be slightly different to suit the audience and to suit the channel, but you know it's from us. You know that's consistency. And then again, that goes back to the very basics of the consistency, what you want to say, your brand, like all of that, knowing your audience and trying to make the most out of it. So we are quite baby in Jigmail at the moment. We are looking into it and we are speaking about it and everything, but it's because there's a lot to do. There's a lot to help you, and there's a lot to do. So sometimes things do fall, of course they do. And Jigmail is just something which we've never really known that much about, but we're definitely speaking to someone about it, and we have that insight. So just, it's never too late, just always look into it. But we've used Nielsen reports before, so like they're a direct mail creative report, so we've used that to help us with building hypothesis and testing them and everything as well. So that's kind of like the way we are. But yeah, we're with a smaller team, we're very consistent, always discussing, especially within being on the office, because I think that's had a big thing as well. If you're if you're working from home and in the office, sometimes like constantly, sometimes it can be lost because the communication is just, you're there, so it's picked up on. But yeah, we do everything, like we proof everything, because you don't want to spend all this time creating it and then not proofing it, because that would be dire. But yeah, so it's also things like, it's little things like the messaging, the technical side of things, that kind of consistency, like height and weight, like put it in kgs and centimeters or kgs and inch, but then across different channels,
it needs to remain the same.
Tiny things like that which you wouldn't even think of. There's also the like brand colors and messaging and imagery and everything. So yeah, so we're definitely quite, it's nice that it is a small team, because we do we know everything which is happening in every channel, or as much as we possibly can know as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we've talked around the data side of things, the picking the audience segmentation, testing, calls to action, linking direct mail and letterbox marketing campaigns with other channels to optimize performance over it. Is there anything else that you think is crucial that we mention while we're talking about optimizing campaigns before we start talking on the recession?
I think in terms of, the packs, you need to make sure that they are legible, make sure people can read it. There is a trend of for people to use whiteout copy on things, and it reduces legibility, especially if you're going to an older audience. So be careful about the kind of colors and fonts that you use. Make sure you use scannable copy, not necessarily Yvette, in terms of you want to get lots of information across, but overall people scan. Humans are lazy. So essentially people are scanning and they're looking for an easy way to understand what you're trying to tell them. So make sure you do that. If you can make it personal, make it personal. If you can make it relatable, even better. Use emotion. That we're all driven by emotion at the end of the day. It's always something that we want and need. That's what we're driven by. Use things like bold, underline things, use infographics if you've got lots of information, to present the information in an easy kind of snackable format. You could even include QR codes and stuff that will actually take you online. There's all sorts of things that you can do with mail and technology that can bring it to life even further. There's ways that you can actually get an actual image coming off of the page. I know Porsche used something where you could hover over the QR code and an actual image of a Porsche would come up and scan around. Obviously that's very expensive, but it is something that you could do. In terms of catalog marketing, I think not on the high street. I think they used AI technology where you can just put your app over the top and it would take you to the page in your catalog, and you don't have to put in the product number and stuff like that. So it just makes life easier. So remember to make life easy for the people that you're sending it to.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen that trend of interactivity, particularly post-COVID, since everybody now uses QR codes all the time. QR code being the classic example. It was even incentivized by Royal Mail under the testing and innovative incentive, so you could get cheaper postage rates through using QR codes. So everybody's used them, but using them and, like you say, virtual reality and augmented reality, particularly for those, like for you can imagine it working for somebody like Porsche or Lamborghini.
If your brand's got the money and the budget, then there's a lot of things that you can do.
I think you're
frozen.
Yeah, absolutely. Final topic.
Then.
Sorry. Oh, am I back now?
Yeah, all good.
Sure, on to our final topic then, just I'm conscious of time, is marketing in a recession, which obviously would be pertinent for everybody listening and watching, I'm sure. The classic anecdotal thing is the businesses who continue to market throughout a recession tend to come out the other end on top. That's typically easy advice to give, harder to take, I imagine, for business owners. So what advice would you have for folks who are looking at next year thinking, oh crikey, what's going to happen with budgets?
I mean, I will be sort of saying, if you can maintain spend, maintain spend, because the research has been done. It's been proven that, marketers that maintain their spend, they're looking longer term. So they're keeping their share of voice. So they may not get a return immediately, but when things come back to normal, then they've already increased their share of voice. So they're more likely to have a better market share. And therefore, when things get better, things will get better for them faster than those companies who didn't. Easier said, obviously. But, you know, in terms of, I was listening to a webinar yesterday. Ritson was talking about marketing in a recession. And that's what was coming up there, is that the brands during COVID that maintained, were the ones who were successful, and who are more successful now, because we're coming out the tail end of that, than those ones who actually turned everything off. And in fact, some of the people who turned it off are now not even with us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was that great quote from Senna, I think it was part in that webinar as well, about how you can't overtake 15 cars on a sunny day.
Exactly.
But you can overtake 15 cars on a rainy day.
Exactly.
So it's continue pushing throughout a recession, and you can come out.
Yeah, exactly. And again, maybe do take some time to research the market. You know, look at what are your customers feeling, what are they thinking, you know, and tailor your communications to that, you know, because if you know that people, they've only got a limited budget as to what they're going to spend, they are going to be looking at spending it on what they actually need first. Yeah. You know, so if you understand your customers and you relate to your customers, then the likelihood is that they're going to stay with you. They might not spend, but they're going to stay with you when they can spend.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I was going to say as well, like, something we all know is prices are going up across everything, but customers' wallets are going down. So you need to make sure you can, like you said, spend the budget, but use it efficiently and use it and optimize it, because something which we're doing is one of our channels has done really well at the moment. So we're like, okay, let's put more into that than we would usually, take some out of this and then really optimize it. Is also looking at doing everything you can to help your budget too. So I was saying earlier about third-party inserts. I think that covers about between a quarter to a third of our total campaign cost. So using those, speaking to Royal Mail, postage discount, QR code discount, Mailmart, all that side of things. Also build good relationship with your suppliers. They know so much about it. Use new trends, efficient printing, paper stock, speak to them, let them help you. You're not on your own, because if you think, oh, I don't even know, just speak to them. They know what to do and how to make it as efficient as possible. The paper obviously is a huge thing at the moment, but let's not forget you still need it. So like it's not completely gone, and there's a reason for that. So I think it's maintaining your spend you need, using the budget which you have been given wisely, but using it is also like using anything you can to help the customer. So obviously the market at the moment, energy crisis, all that malarkey. Our products, for example, like cheap to run, maximize that, something which we didn't usually normally do. We would usually focus on like some other part of the technology, but maximize it. Like I think when the energy prices went up, our mailer, we had our main default brochure which we sent out to our customers had about 3 spreads on just about energy efficiency, not even some part of it about our light, but other parts just about things to help, tips to save, just so maybe you're not pushing your products so heavily because people aren't looking to just spend at the moment, but keep interacting with them on other levels, on things which they can relate to, because that way they'll stay in touch with you, like you were saying, touch with your brand, and actually be like, oh, this is really useful information. They're not just helping me in what the product is, but they're also helping me in what they're telling me as well. So yeah, I think there's so many things which, yes, things are going up, but it shouldn't always take that to make you look at reducing and making efficient costs as well. But it does, which is good. But yeah, definitely using what you have and optimizing what you're using as well is a big, I think, is a big thing.
I think if you have to put your prices up, which pretty much everybody is going to have to do, I think as long as you are communicating about the value of the product or service that you were talking about, I think that's where people can get on side with that, you know, because everybody knows that everybody's going to have to put up their prices. So as long as it's framed properly, then I think that's not necessarily a big worry.
Yeah.
So I think the point there around being is perhaps changing the messaging slightly, rather than a piece of mail coming through and it's all about making a purchase there and then or soon after. It's about, like you said, Yvette, adding value that's linked to your brand, and then you remain front of mind throughout this period, so that when the customer is ready to buy, you're there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or ensure that you have, different ways to pay. That can help people too.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was music to my ears is from agency side was leaning on the agencies and the print suppliers and the mailing suppliers that you're working with, because they know, we can add from Webmart side, we can add a lot more value when a customer comes to us and say, this is what we want to achieve, we need to reduce our cost by this amount. We can add a lot more value at this stage, rather than we've figured it all out ourselves, what's the price for this?
Yeah.
So that way of working, I think, will serve brands well over the next year or two. Just conscious of time, so I'm going to open it up to questions. If anybody has got any questions they want to just pop in the chat, and while we're waiting to see if any of those have come in, we'll just very quickly talk sustainability, because that's not something we managed to get onto, but obviously is a big old trend in the world of quite rightly, a big trend in the world of marketing. So what is it something that's high on your agenda, Yvette? Is it something that you've been working on?
Bit crazy again, but yeah, I get so yeah, we are, so I'm just going to go back to the
put you on the spot there.
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to go back to the part exchange mailer I was saying about. So sustainability is a huge thing. I think it's very I don't know, new as well. It's always been there, but in the past few months I've definitely seen it pick up. Everyone's kind of speaking about it a lot more. It's very big in your face, which is a great thing, and finally it's happened. But yeah, it's taken a while to do that. But let's just remember, it's not always down to like the paper and the print side and everything. You could also do things as a company. So yeah, like I said, go back to the part exchange mailer. When people returned their lights, we were upcycling them. So we would clean them, make sure all of the parts worked and very efficient. And then we actually did an outlet on eBay of our own brand, so like a serious outlet, and have a discount of those lights. So different stages of how great they are, still giving a warranty on them, still giving a 30-day risk-free trial on them, still giving what we would usually give on our mainline products. Obviously, it's an older version. We haven't done these with the LEDs, the purely the legacy, the halogen editions at the moment. But it's taking that, not just throwing away the parts. Use what you can. I know that's difficult with a lot of companies, because obviously like retail, they wouldn't be able to part exchange, but it is the whole thing about like eBay and sustainability, and not just like recycling with everything you can, and upcycling as well. So if you can't recycle, if you can't commit to so much sustainability, then find other ways. There are so many other ways in which you can do it, and that's something which we've done.
It's something similar to the approach Webmart are taking in trying to have sustainable solutions for customers, rather than just having the same solutions that you've always had that might have a negative impact on the environment, but communicating them in a more sustainable way.
Exactly.
I'm just going to jump in because we've had a question through from Rachel, who's asked, do you have any go-to data or research providers for B2B direct mail? Nicola, have you done much B2B DM?
B2B direct mail is tricky. And if you've got your own data, then it's easier, and you would essentially use a similar format to you would for consumer stuff. But actually getting data for B2B can be tricky. But if you want some help, then she can happily come to me afterwards, and I'll talk her through it, no problem. And the guys at Market Reach can help with that as well.
Yeah, B2B data is always a tricky one, just because the speed at which it changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Consumer data changes quick enough, but B2B data changes twice as fast. So it's a tricky one to get accurate data for, but it'll depend a little bit, Rachel, on the types of organizations you're targeting and what kind of individuals within those businesses. But
it's a tricky one.
Oh, hang on. Got another one through from Rachel. See what stats and facts around B2B mailing as opposed to buying data. Oh, okay, fab. Okay.
Okay. Again, take a look at Market Reach. They may have some on their website on B2B data. Again, it's not as big a chunk of mail as the consumer side of things. So B2C is the significant chunk of data that all of the kind of research has been dealt with. But if you go onto the Market Reach website, they may have some stuff on there.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll have some averages and things like that. I think whenever we've done B2B packs for people in the past, it's always been bigger packs, very, very personalized to that business and what the services that you're trying to sell can do for that company. So we've done all kinds of weird and wonderful personalized bits for individual businesses. But it's a very different approach that you take with B2B stuff than B2C. But yeah, I'll say feel free to reach out to myself or Nick after this if we can help anyway, I'm sure. Anything else that we want to say on sustainability or any questions that anybody else wants to ask?
On sustainability, make sure your data is clean. Yeah. Make sure that it's accurate. There's no point sending out mail to addresses that are incorrect. You're wasting your money, and it's not necessarily good for the environment either. I think committing to net zero. Here at Whistl we are. So looking at sustainable papers, sustainable inks, etc. And then obviously there is the other side of it that Yvette alluded to. There's also your kind of energy use, your employee stuff, the transportation side of it. There's a whole. It's not just the paper side of it. There's a whole load of things that impact your carbon footprint, really. So yeah, make sure you're looking at all of those things.
Yeah, I was also going to say as well, going back to speaking to your suppliers and everything, when you look at doing printers, if you've got, if you've got a quote which you've received and they're the same price and everyone has done the best they can to get you for that to work with you and everything, ask them what printers they're going to be using, how their sustainability side of it is, maybe choose the option which is better for the environment as well as your budgets, matching those, because then at least that might be something which you can pop on your mailings and say, oh, this is what we've done and stuff. So I think making it known that you're doing it as well. There's, I think, Tom, we were speaking before and you said it'd be really interesting to see do a sustainability test and see if a small messaging or an actual kind of impactful messaging on your creative actually makes a difference in that. And that's something which we would really be interesting to actually look into for the creative side and actually say, okay, well, it's a big thing now, does it make a difference? But don't just do it now while there's an energy crisis. Do it in next year sometime as well. Do it when things maybe have settled down a bit, which we hope they do, but
absolutely. Yeah, that'd be a super interesting test to do. So yeah, we'd love to do that. But our approach for the sustainability side of things.
Well,
you keep freezing
across all channels, which is calculate. I think I've frozen again. It was a great piece of wit and insight. You just imagine it. Now, saying our approach is calculate, mitigate, offset, communicate. If you can't or don't calculate the impact that a piece of mail or a product or something is going to have on the environment, it's very, very difficult to know how to mitigate the impact of that. So we always start out with data and working out what the actual carbon footprint of a campaign is. Then when we have that kind of granular information, we've got the data available to consult on how we mitigate the impact. So it might be, like you say, about different printer, different location, different press, different paper, different inks, something like that. What we can't mitigate away, we can then offset through accredited schemes or sequestering schemes or anything like that. And then the final point is communicate. So explaining to your customers what you've done, why you've done it, schemes you've supported to offset it, and that you've been mailing responsibly. And through taking that approach, we found it's helped our customers mitigate the environmental impact that campaigns have had. Right, I don't think we've had any more questions through, and we are bang on 11 o'clock. So I think that's just left for me to thank you both, Nicola and Yvette, once again for making the time to be part of this webinar today. Thanks very much for your time, and keep an eye out for the recording.
Thank you so much for having me and for everyone. It was great to be part of it and also to hear from you both about everything too. So yeah, it was really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, right back at you. Thanks ever so much, Tom.
Lovely.
Great to
Thanks
see
all.
you.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.